Hey, y'all, it's CityCast DC host Michael Schaefer. If you are new here, CityCast DC is the daily local podcast where we talk about all things DC in your podcast feed every weekday by 6 a.m. Enjoy today's show.
If you're like me and want facials that actually deliver real results, then you have to check out Silver Mirror Facial Bar. Rated the top facial in DC since 2019, Silver Mirror specializes in expert-driven 30-minute and 50-minute facials that tackle real skin concerns like dullness, breakouts, and fine lines. First-time guests get $30 off their first facial, and they have locations in DuPont Circle, Penn Quarter, and Navy Yard. Just use the code CityCast30 at silvermirror.com/CityCast to claim your offer. That's CityCast30 for $30 off your first personalized facial at silvermirror.com/CityCast.
Today on CityCast DC, Mayor Bowser announced Monday that she wants to repeal Initiative 82, the hugely popular DC plan to eliminate the tipped minimum wage. 3 out of 4 voters were in favor in 2022, so how do people feel about the mayor potentially overriding them? Jessica Sidman from Washingtonian is here to explain why this is happening now and how all the stakeholders feel about it. Speaking of budgets, our sponsor, District Bridges, is committed to supporting DC and building community, but the ongoing budget issues with Congress have had a big impact on them. So stick around for the end of the episode, where they explain how we can all help them help local businesses. Today's Wednesday, May 7th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Jessica, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mayor Muriel Bowser wants to repeal Initiative 82, which we know DC voters overwhelmingly supported. It eliminates the tip minimum wage. Why does Bowser want to do this?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, it's worth, talking a little bit about what the tipped wage is, because I think a lot of people are confused about what it means and how restaurant workers are paid. So basically, the tipped wage or the tip credit allows businesses to use the gratuities of customers toward workers' base wages. So when this all started out, the tipped wage in DC was around $5.35. Workers still had to be paid, the minimum wage, which is currently $17.50, but they could make up that difference using tips that they get from diners or whatever other kind of tips in their industry. And this initiative basically phases that system out. And the goal is that by 2027, the tipped wage will be on par with the full minimum wage. And currently it's at $10 an hour. So basically what that means is that for restaurants, their labor costs are essentially tripling over those 5 years. And, that has had a big impact, whether you agree with Initiative 82 or not. That's a big change to the business model for a lot of restaurants, and many of them are struggling.
So what's the state of I-82 right now? Like, how far along are we in that elimination process that you were talking about?
Right. So the tipped wage currently is $10 an hour. It's set to go up to $12 an hour this summer in July. And then there are these incremental increases that will continue until 2027.
And you spoke a little bit to how restaurant owners are feeling about all this, but how are tipped workers that you've spoken to, how do they feel about Initiative 82?
Yeah, it really depends on who you ask. There's certainly a group of workers who say this wasn't necessary. Initiative 82 wasn't necessary. It was fixing a problem that didn't exist. Many of them already make far more than the minimum wage anyways, $20, $30, $40 an hour. And so they see potential cuts to the labor force and restaurants closing, and they say this is a bad thing. On the flip side, you have a lot of workers who think that this is a stabilizing force to have a little bit more predictability in their pay, to be maybe a little bit less reliant on tips in their base wage. And obviously there's a lot of biases and discrimination that can happen with tipping. Obviously, this doesn't eliminate tipping, but maybe makes you less reliant on it for just making your base wage. They argue that it reduces the chance of wage theft. So, it's a little bit of a mixed bag depending on who you ask.
Well, who benefits under like a tipped wage system and who gets the short end of the stick? It seems like, as you said, the data about tipping is clear that like somebody might just like have a problem with the ethnicity of the person who is serving them and so under-tip them based on that, right? Like there's all kinds of bias that can be baked into it. Who is winning in a tipped wage system and who is getting the short end?
A lot of the restaurant owners, obviously, they prefer the old model. They like the tipped wage. It's lower labor costs for them. Many of them, that's just the business model that they open with. And so, just trying to reconfigure how they're paying people and trying to make up for those labor costs by instituting service fees has, really been a struggle for them. And, many say that's hurt their business. And I think, a lot of the people who do benefit from Initiative 82 are the people who don't have a publicist, So I feel like we don't hear from them quite as often. But, many times these are workers who, maybe they're immigrants, people of color, maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe they're struggling to, they don't work at one of these fancy restaurants and they are actually struggling to reach the minimum wage with their tips or, seeing a lot of fluctuations. So, I think I think there are people it's helping and there are people it's hurting. And the big question is, I guess, which group is bigger?
74% of people who voted in D.C. approved this initiative in 2022. Do folks in the district still support this plan?
Yeah, so that's 74%. That's a big portion of the vote. I think it's also worth noting that this is not the first time we've been here. There was a similar initiative that also passed by voters, and the DC Council overturned it. And then Initiative 82 came along, and many of the same council members, have been wary to overturn it yet again. So, I think like if it came on the ballot a third time, would it pass again? I don't know. I think it's a very complicated issue, and it's a lot of people don't understand all the nuances of it. It's complicated for me to explain. I think even, for some of the DC council members, there's a lot of different factors into it. So it's hard to say exactly where public opinion is at this exact moment.
Do you think that DC council would go along with the mayor's proposal?
So DC Council Chairman Phil Mendelson basically said that he did not think that a repeal has the support of the council. And he's someone who did not support Initiative 82. He said it was a mistake. And he did indicate that he would be personally open to repealing it. But the question is, does the full council want to repeal it again and overturn the will of the voters for a second time?
Yeah, like what would it mean to just undo this right now?
So under the mayor's proposal, the tipped wage would go back to $5.95. And as I mentioned, it's set to raise to $12 per hour in July. So that's half of what it's about to be. It is worth mentioning that, whether it's $5.95 or $12 an hour, employers do have to ensure that workers are making that full minimum wage of $17.50 with tips or without them. It would be a pretty big change.
Ever wondered why mosquitoes bite you? Or maybe you're curious about policy, like solving the housing shortage or bridging the digital divide. Or maybe you want to hear it all. After the Fact, a podcast by Pew, breaks down today's big issues with expert insights and real stories. Whether you're into the research or the personal stories behind it, we've got you covered. Get the stories behind the stats. Listen to After the Fact wherever you get your podcasts. Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations, like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. To get tips for how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and to look up your nearest drop-off site in the district, visit paintcare.org/3simplerules.
All right, so every Mother's Day, we treat my mom to a special day out. She gets her nails done. We take her to tea. We go out for dinner or we make her dinner. You know, that sort of thing. Now, I can do all of that because I happen to live close by her. But a lot of my friends don't live near their parents at all. And all their mom wants is a phone call. But what if you could get her something more than just the phone call? That's where Aura Frames comes in. Do you have a funny photo of you and your friends or you and your family that she would love as a keepsake in addition to that phone call? You can send her a new picture of you and the gang right from your phone. I mean, even my tech-averse mom would be a huge fan of that. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver mat frame. That's auraframes.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
So I'm curious, how have folks been reacting to Bowser saying that she wants to repeal this initiative?
I've seen a mix of reactions. A lot of restaurant folks are cheering this news, saying it's about time. Another group is outraged, and a bunch of workers with a local hospitality union protested yesterday in front of the Wilson building against a repeal for Initiative 82, saying that Initiative 82 repeal would essentially be wage theft, bad for workers. And so, you know, there's also a strong opposition to what the mayor is proposing. So this is a very divisive issue, and, you know, there's going to be a lot of debate about this going forward.
I know a lot of critics will say that Bowser is just a little too cozy with organizations like the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, which has reportedly been lobbying for this exact same change. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, certainly the head of the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington, used to work for Mayor Bowser.
Okay, so that's a pretty cozy. That might be, I can see why people might describe that relationship as cozy.
Yeah, but I think that the mayor also, to be fair, has never really been a supporter of Initiative 82. But it is notable that the Restaurant Association, up until recently, has not actually actively lobbied to overturn Initiative 82. Initially, when it passed, they'd actually pushed to speed up the implementation, saying, you know, ripping off the Band-Aid was going to be better. When that wasn't successful, they shifted to trying to pause the rollout of Initiative 82, which, you know, I think is something that still could be on the table, to pause it at $10 an hour. But then a couple months ago, the Restaurant Association came out again and said, actually, you know what, we do want to repeal Initiative 82, and has been actively lobbying to kill this law.
What explains that, like, drastic about face?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a drastic about face because they've obviously always been against it, but you know, I think there has been a lot of talk about restaurants being in trouble this year in particular. There are a lot of factors going on, a lot of places that are still struggling to recover from the pandemic. Costs are really high. You know, obviously they would cite all the Initiative 82 factors. You have this new Trump administration coming in and introducing tariffs, potentially are already, laying off a lot of the people who work in this area and potentially affecting the greater economy. And they did a survey, actually, the Restaurant Association did a survey earlier this year that found, I think 29% of the restaurants that responded said that they were somewhat or very likely to close. And the number was even higher for full service casual restaurants. And that, I think, spooked a lot of people and set off a lot of alarm bells. I think there are still some questions over whether, that number is right, but whether it is or not, I think it's reflective of how so many in this industry are feeling right now and the fear and uncertainty that's permeating the industry.
Well, a lot of places are closing, and they're citing Initiative 82 as the reason why they're closing. Whether or not that's true, I can't say, but Sticky Rice closed and said it was the initiative, Brooklyn's Finest. I should add that both of these places had that 20% service charge, which a lot of restaurants added to say that they were kind of using that to offset rising cost of wages. How can they blame I-82 when they added that 20% service charge to accommodate the rise in wages?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many factors here, and all of the restaurants that you named, they're not citing Initiative 82 exclusively. There are other factors as well. Everything has gotten more expensive. A lot of people say diners aren't going out as much. A lot of people don't like the fees and maybe are avoiding them. I don't know. But like I was saying, whether you agree with Initiative 82 or not, and whether it's ultimately good or bad, it is a big change for a business. And a lot of them are actually struggling to adapt to it, whether it is, raising their prices, adding a service fee. They somehow have to make up that cost. And that is not something that's built into their current business models.
Well, a lot of people feel that eliminating the tip minimum wage is like the moral thing to do. This tipping, we've already discussed the ways that tipping policies can be racist or, accommodate bias, and they have their origins in slavery, right? Like, it's not a super cool system, and it doesn't feel good to be involved in that system. And I wonder, this idea of like passing the cost of wages and rising labor costs onto the consumer, it just doesn't feel good at any step of the way. And so I'm curious if you think, do restaurateurs actually believe this is a system that is best for everyone, that this is the best way to accommodate for these rising costs is just to keep tipping the way that it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to like, this is the system we have. This is the system we've had for a really long time. Should diners be the ones to pay the base wages of workers? I think that's, a worthy debate. But, we're also not in a bubble here in DC. We have you can go to Virginia, Maryland, and they still have the tipped wage. So that's a factor. And it's a system that we're all kind of accustomed to because we are all used to going out and tipping. That's just part of American culture. And it's hard to, change that. And some people actually, they like the tipping, they prefer that. They want to reward good service. So it's a complicated issue. I don't know.
I completely agree. And it definitely is one of those issues. Like, if you want to start an all-day back and forth, bring up tipping on Reddit, you'll be there all day in the comments fighting for your life, no matter what you advocate for, whether you're like, yay, tipping or boo tipping. It is a hot button issue. And, I'm very sympathetic to servers and restaurant staffs. I'm sympathetic to owners and sort of how difficult it would be, particularly in a city like DC where real estate costs are so expensive. But I do wonder how much of this is just like a shift in the landscape. Like, everything is so expensive. Nobody wants to go out to dinner if they feel like it's going to cost an arm and a leg and they're not going to be getting what they want, or it just doesn't feel good to be fleeced at the end of your meal. And so I can understand why people are just going out less. And so I wonder if how much of this conversation around restaurants closing and restaurants struggling is tip-based, and how much of it is just like, yeah, times are changing, people are tightening their belts, people are going out less, people are drinking less, people are eating at home more, people are bracing for economic uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, labor is expensive. If you want, your server or bartender to make a certain wage, that's gonna, whether it's a service fee or increased prices, like it's going to cost more. Okay. And so there's a little bit of a catch-22 happening where people kind of want it both ways, right? They don't want restaurants to raise their prices, and restaurants are very sensitive also about raising their prices. And so that's why I think a lot of them have turned to the service fee instead, because it can just act as a substitute for a tip. But then obviously that's complicated because there's also like the tip line at the bottom, and then people feel pressure to add more, and then they're upset about that, and they don't like to feel like they've been ripped off or they're paying too much, or they're just confused and they just don't know what to do. And I think one of the side effects of Initiative 82 has been this confusion over these fees, which have really run the gamut from, the 3% to the 10%, 20%, and every place is doing something else. And a lot of them aren't very clear on what are the tipping expectations, and the effect on the diner is maybe they don't want to go out. They don't like that headache, or, they feel like it's going to be more expensive than it appears to be. So, it's kind of a lose-lose in a lot of ways.
It does feel like a lose-lose. And I think that's probably part of it, that like people don't want to voluntarily go out to eat to like get mixed up in some sort of like ethical moral dilemma of like, I've tipped, but now there's a service charge. Like it's a lot. And I can understand why people are just like, ugh, I just don't want to deal with it.
No, I guess one other thing I'd say is, I would say like there are, even if Initiative 82 is repealed, there are a lot of restaurants that have already changed their business models because of it, and are, already paying their staff the full minimum wage. They're not using the tip credit at all. And some of the people that I've talked to said, we've switched to this system and it's working, so we're just going to keep it, whether Initiative 82 is repealed or not. So I think that's another thing that hasn't been talked about a lot. I think even if Initiative 82 disappears and we go back to the original tipped wage, there are some places that'll just keep this model, and that may also include keeping a service fee.
Do you know of any bars or restaurants that are handling this change in a way that consumers like and that maybe works for the staff as well?
Yeah, I think they're starting to develop some more universal language. It's hard for me to, off the top of my head, mention a specific place. But I think, for me, like the places where it's just like a 20% tip, or sorry, a 20% service fee, and then there's some kind of language of like, tipping is not expected but appreciated, and they explain a little bit of like how it's used. That's always appreciated to me, because I don't feel like I'm obligated to leave more, but maybe if I had a really great time, I'll leave a little bit more. So I think it's really just setting the expectation and a couple lines at the bottom of the check, or something like that, and just being really clear about how that money is used and what the expectations are for tipping. That really goes a long way. And I think there's probably some people who disagree with me, but I think people are somewhat getting used to the service fees a little bit, at least the ones that are, more standardized around 20%. So I wouldn't be surprised if, that continues no matter what. And I think another interesting thing to watch is, what does the DC Council do about service fees? There was a debate a while back about potentially banning them, and that didn't happen. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that issue come up again, especially since, Initiative 82 is back on the table. So that's going to be something to watch, or maybe they cap it at some lower number. Who's to say?
Well, what else do you think is next for this whole conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down to the DC Council and whether they want to repeal this. And it's obviously going to be a very complicated issue for them. A lot of them don't support Initiative 82, but they've also said that they will not try to repeal it for a second time. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on both sides, and we'll just see how it plays out.
Well, Jessica, thank you for breaking this all down for us. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm about to hand over the mic to my colleague, Priyanka Tilve, who is here with our sponsor, District Bridges, to talk about all the work they do for DC and how you can get involved too. But first, I want to give a big thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbors, Aminata T, Naya W, James G, Leo P, Ruth M, Shamina C, and Tem H. Thank you so much for supporting what we do. Okay, Priyanka, take it away.
Hi, I'm executive producer Priyanka Tilve here with Brianne Dorenbush, the executive director of District Bridges. Brianne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know it's kind of a rough time in DC, and we've become very familiar with District Bridges. You guys are such friends of ours at this point, and we know that you support small businesses through your Main Street programs and Access Point. You also have all of the people that you help through the Community Navigation Program. How has that work been affected by everything that's going on with the DC budget? How do those budget cuts potentially affect the work you do?
Yeah, I think it's really hard right now in the city from a perspective of budgeting as organizations, as businesses. Uncertainty is not really helpful when you're trying to make decisions on, are you going to hire? Are you going to expand? Do you need to contract your services? And so there's just a lot of uncertainty in our city right now. And that makes it really difficult for businesses to feel confident about how their business is going. As an organization, we receive federal dollars through pass-through funds through several agencies. And there have been a lot of cuts or uncertainty. Foundations have also had to make cuts. And so that makes it really difficult to continue services at the same levels that we've been providing previously. And so going into a difficult budget cycle, there have to be concessions made, there have to be cuts. And I think we really, as a city, need to be focusing on how do we support small businesses in a constrained budget environment. And that's really why I think Main Street programs like ours are so vital, because we're really on the ground helping small businesses make those decisions about how to stay profitable, how to stay in business through difficult times. Also, for social services organizations, a lot of the cuts that are coming are really impacting projects that are supporting our most vulnerable citizens here in the city. And that's really concerning. And so really looking for how do we support our residents who need a helping hand, whether that's through community navigation, through other partners that we work with. That kind of support is really under threat right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much happening at once. And you just listed out a bunch of different threats facing District Bridges, facing community organizations, facing small businesses. I know that you all work with something like 800 small businesses in the city, right? What would you say is the biggest challenge that they're facing right now?
Every industry has different challenges that they're facing. You know, right now, the tariffs that businesses are facing make how they do business really uncertain. For retailers, for restaurants, the Restaurant Association put out a study earlier this spring that was talking about 40% of their respondents said that they may not be in business in the next year. That's really concerning. And so providing support to those businesses is more critical than ever before. And when those businesses go out, that also means jobs go out. And so the uncertainty for the job market is also really scary.
Yeah, that restaurant stat especially really concerned me when I saw it. And I have been hearing about more restaurant closures. Tail Goat just mentioned that they're closing at the end of the year. I mean, District Bridges' whole thing is helping businesses, helping local organizations. What are you all able to do at this time?
So there are a lot of external factors that often impact businesses. And so then when we're looking at more constrained budgets where the amount of dollars available for small business grants through various programs is smaller, that means the amount that businesses can access is also smaller. And so more constrained environment means more constrained for everyone. And so, looking at ways that we can really use our voice to help remind people that small businesses need your support now more than ever before. Buying local beers, buying from your local farmers market, those kind of decisions, while a singular decision in your week, make a huge difference to the local economy and to the local businesses that are making our communities more vibrant and places that people want to live, work, and play.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, people should shop locally because we make so many great products here. There are great beers. There are great local wines. If people wanted to get involved or support the community in other ways, what are some ways they could do that?
Yeah, I think volunteering for events and organizations like District Bridges is always really important, whether that's our community cleanups. Mount Pleasant has a weekly community cleanup on Thursdays. Not only is that a way for you to connect with neighbors who care about the neighborhood that you live in, it makes a tangible difference. And I think sometimes when we are feeling out of control and there are so many factors that we don't have a say in, we don't have a say in whether or not the house is going to pick up our budget. Please, please, please do that. Fix our budget gap. But we do have a say as to where we're shopping, where we're living, how we're investing in our community, how we're supporting our neighbors in need. And that makes a really big difference. DC is made up of a ton of neighborhoods. People actually live here. All of you guys know that. That's why we love partnering with you, bringing the reality that while we are the capital of this nation, we should be everything that a city can possibly be. And that means also investing locally.
Brianne, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Priyanka.
Check out districtbridges.org to learn more, and we'll have that link in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your favorite foodie. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.